Hi guys, and welcome to another dose of Women Are the Medicine. On this show, we aim to bring you voices from our network of incredibly wise and visionary women who are bucking the system, deliberately creating a life of joy, impact, and fulfillment using their many gifts. I'm your host, Naz, and I am genuinely over the moon to have you listening. This podcast is growing in popularity, so thank you for subscribing, for liking, for sharing. We really do love you. So on to my guest today, whom I've been chomping at the bit to speak to since we started the podcast. This is our second attempt at this recording, and today we're going to absolutely nail it. I'm so excited to introduce to you Claire Diane. She is an international facilitator, somatic guide, educator, and leader in the field of human change and evolution. Now, Claire invites individuals to move beyond old patterns of survival and intellectualization into a state of embodied creation and resonance. Her work blends somatic and energetic practices, helping people to access their inner wisdom, reclaim their creative agency, and experience a profound shift from disconnection to wholeness, aligning deeply with the natural flow and intelligence of life itself. Claire, welcome to the show. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here again.
Thank you, Naz. Yeah, me too. Very, very happy to be here. Oh, I get to have another chat with you, so that's perfect.
We do. And I learned so much from what we spoke about last week. And for those of you listening, our recording didn't upload, so we're having another go at it. But it was a rich and beautiful conversation. And I'm really excited to bring you to our listeners, Claire. I think your work is so important. So perhaps you could describe in your own words what it is that you do, how you help people in a nutshell.
Yeah. So my work is really all about helping women to rise up from their past, from their conditioning, and to consciously create themselves from their deepest essence. And really, this is all about, being able, the way I really see and feel into this is that this is about being able to translate our vision into our being, so that we can all really become who we came here to be and live with the pride and the aliveness of living in the constant evolution and the updating nature of our life. And that is something that many of us find very difficult to do for all sorts of reasons that I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive straight into that, because I know a lot of your work centers around somatic practices, around trauma. And I think it's really important we hear the word trauma so much now. I think when it came into being in the coaching field and everyone was like, yes, you must be trauma informed, it's really important. And then it became a bit of a buzzword, and it's almost like everyone has trauma, everyone has to be trauma informed. What is it that trauma does to us, and how is it that you specifically see the work that you do, the role of your work in helping people to overcome that trauma?
Great questions. Well, I think if we just backtrack for a moment, when you said it's become a buzzword and like everyone has trauma, and I think if we acknowledge, ancestral, collective, historical, individual, generational trauma, we have to accept that we are all experiencing some kind of trauma. And actually, in many ways, our Western civilization is inherently traumatic. Capitalism is inherently traumatic. It's kind of like the sea that we're all swimming in to some degree. And then, of course, we have our individual family, generational layers on top of that. So, and I think it's really good in our society that we have really been presencing that a lot more collectively, that we're understanding that, yes, the things that we go through collectively, historically, all of these things, they do have impacts on us. And it doesn't help our collective or individual evolution to actually not be paying attention to some of those things and have a deeper understanding of that. And I do think, yeah, we can hear the word trauma a lot, and in a way it has become a buzzword. But if we look at the really helpful side of that, it's that actually that's in the awareness of so many people, when collectively this is rising, and that's a really great thing. And because one of the things that I do is train other coaches to become trauma informed, the language that the word you used before was like, it's a buzzword and coaches have to become trauma informed, almost in a way that could feel a little bit oppressive, of just like, you must do this. And I think it's really important, but a huge thing that we have to always acknowledge is that we have choice, so in the way that I market that and in the way that I speak about it, it's actually just that your whole business and your life and your professional work, your client relationships, all of these things will enrich massively. And of course, that's something you can choose to do or choose not to do. And I do think it's really important that we do, but we also have the choice to say, yes, this feels important to me. This feels, in alignment with the direction that my soul, my aliveness is calling me to be in, rather than it just being this place of just kind of dense obligation, like I must do this thing. And if we talk for a moment about, well, what is, yes, we do hear that word a lot, don't we? What is trauma? There are so many different ways that you define and understand trauma. And I think the key thing to understand is that trauma is a disconnection from our authenticity, from our aliveness, and that trauma is not about the things or the thing that happened to us. It's about what happens in our bodies in response to the things that we go through. And in a broad way, what happens is that we move from a system that is open and inherently updating, because that is what our whole nervous system and body is meant to be. It's meant to be in this open flow, this resonance with others, this resonance with our inner world. That's a natural aspect of what it really means to be a human being, that we have that capacity to resonate in that way, others, self, the whole world, and to really feel, to bring the world alive in us, to bring other people alive in us, and for our own inner experience to feel alive in us. And trauma really shifts us from that state of being an open, updating kind of resonant system to being a closed system. And that's where then, we disconnect. We live in patterns of protection. We live in patterns of defense. And we end up being in these kind of self-perpetuating loops. We're not updating from any kind of life stream or soul stream or aliveness. We're just constantly kind of reliving the past, because the past is still alive in us. And really, the past, when we say the past, it's like the past is only the past because it holds energy, right? So it's like the body is holding this energy. And that's another way that I think it's really helpful to describe trauma, is that it's an incomplete cycle of energy. And that's what makes the past the past. When we talk about it in that way, is that it's that we're still holding the energy of the past. And so a lot of my work, I do have two sort of different branches of my work, but my work personally with other women, with other entrepreneurs, to help them sort of move beyond the past, move beyond trauma, dysregulation, is really that we learn how to connect more deeply to ourselves, that we learn how to kind of live in that stream of our own updates, to really feel what it is that we feel, and to shift from that place of non-updatingness, where we're just, unconsciously repeating patterns, to actually more consciously directing our life. And a huge part of that is, that we do have to actually expand our consciousness and become a lot more aware of all of our unconscious patterns, all of our unconscious habits, thoughts, all of these things, emotions, and that there's a deep piece around really learning how to connect to what I call like our deep aliveness, which really is like the pulse of life, that place that we are constantly evolving, updating. There is this infinite potential that we get to access being a human being, and that really the conditioning of our past and trauma disconnects us from that.
I love how you described like you being on your sort of online, the system's online, it's open, it's whole when you are connected. That feels so true. There's like an attunement, isn't there, to the messages that you're getting, because we're always receiving messages through our body from the universe. And like, if you're not connected to the instrument that's receiving that, you're disconnected. And I just wonder how much of our materialistic capitalist society is actually keeping us disconnected as well. So we're not only are we disconnected from ourselves, but we're living in a system that is also disconnected. You know, we're on our devices and it feels like connection, but it's not. And I just wonder how much of your work also speaks to maybe helping people to see beyond the capitalist veil. I know, do people wake up to the realities of this when they work with you?
Yeah, because that's a part of our unconscious conditioning, right? It's part of the sea that we're all swimming in. It's part of the breath that we're all breathing, right? And you'll always, you'll live the conditioning until you can see it as something different. It's like many of us, we live the story, we live the pattern. But actually, when we develop this capacity to expand our consciousness and really move beyond all of those entrenched ways of being that are keeping us in that kind of fixed density of the matter, and the recreation of the constant looping of the unintegrated past, when we actually move beyond that, we get to wake up. It is a kind of awakening that we get to see all of the ways that something that maybe we'd taken to just be, this is just who I am, or this is just the way life is. It's like, no, this is who I am when I'm hurting. This is the way life is when it's hurting. This is not inherently the way that I am. This is not the way that life's meant to be. Capitalism isn't the way that life is meant to be. It's the conditioning that we've all been kind of dragged into, and we're all existing within. And so, yeah, I think it's a really beautiful thing that we get to kind of wake up to that, and we get to wake up to the stories and the conditioning, and actually occupy a more expansive state of our being, where we actually have, again, what I call like divine agency, which is like our life-given capacity to choose something for myself. Like, am I going to say yes to this? Am I going to say no to this? Do I consent to this? Am I consenting to this worldview? Am I consenting to this concept of myself? Am I consenting to this concept of the world? But the thing is that until you become aware of those things, you don't even have the capacity to exercise that agency, because it just is the way it is until it's not.
Yes. I wonder if for people listening, you might be able to describe some of those patterns of disconnection, some of those patterns of behavior that present in people who haven't yet woken up, or haven't yet had discovered that they have conscious creative agency over how they feel and what they choose. Like, what are some of the ways that you can, what are some of the symptoms, I suppose, that people present to you when they come and work with you?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of a few different things that center around key themes. So one key theme is about reactivity. So a sense of feeling that we're always reacting in our life, that we're quick to get angry, that we're quick to behave in a certain way that we then feel shame about afterwards, or we feel like, oh wow, where did that come from, or just that wasn't me. That we spend a lot of time sort of being in this cycle of being triggered, but maybe we don't even know we're being triggered, because maybe we don't have the level of presence to in the moment say, wow, this is triggering. My unintegrated past is awakened in this moment. So I think the piece around reactivity is a huge one, which goes together with a lot of disconnection from ourselves, because in order to actually respond to your life, to respond to partner, to respond to people at your work, you have to be in the present moment, right? You have to be able to be exactly where you are, to feel what you feel, to be grounded in your body in that moment, because the only way to respond and not react is to be in that stream of presence, right? So I think another huge thing is that we really feel a loss of presence, which again is a loss of a sense of aliveness. And we sort of feel, and that can manifest as like feeling very depleted, kind of fatigued, like in the body, but also emotionally, a sense of just really feeling stuck. This like the story of I'm stuck, I don't know how to change. And again, the stuck being because I'm constantly repeating patterns, I'm reacting and not responding. And the people that I work with, there's also a lot of patterns, because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, women who run their own businesses. A lot of the unique things that come up as well are things are pieces around expressing yourself and like using your voice. So sharing what it is that you feel called to share, or speaking about the things that really matter to you. Being seen is a huge thing, which is linked to that, but also goes into an avenue of actually like feeling that it's okay for you to kind of really embody your medicine and really like speak your gift to the world. A lot of women I work with find that very, very challenging, and therefore they find it very hard to market their work, and they find it very hard to actually be in like what I call energetic integrity, which is that, well, when I'm marketing my work and I'm saying I can help you do this, or that I'm really embodying that in my own life, and I'm really owning that I get to embody that space of my own medicine, and like, yes, I really have something to bring. And it's not, it's not about being cocky or, being full of oneself, but in a sense, it's like, yeah, you do have to be full of yourself, full of yourself, of your essence, of your aliveness, of the core of your being. So yeah, a lot of patterns around people pleasing as well is really common, like fawning. I'd say those are probably some of the big ones. And urgency, like feeling like we're running, everything feels urgent. There's no space, there's no time, there's no capacity to slow down, this kind of constant spinning of the wheels. And then the other big one I wanted to mention was the over analyzing and the intellectual, oh my gosh, I can't even say the bloody word. We'll just say over analyzing is just living in one's head, that we're just in the story, we're in our heads, we're in this filter that actually stops us from being able, and it is a coping mechanism. So many of these patterns I've just described, they are, they arise from our intelligence. They are inherently intelligent patterns, and we don't want to. It's like, yes, of course we all want to be present, but it's not a helpful thing to pathologize not being present, right? We all want to speak our truth, but it's not helpful to pathologize not speaking your truth. So again, a huge thing, a huge part of my orientation is really honoring that kind of deep intelligence of where these patterns come from, and that it serves none of us when we're not able to honor that, because then we're in this constant resisting of like pushing against something, and it's essentially to place another form of abandonment on something that's already hurting. Yes, I'm finding it hard to show up in this way, and then I'm pathologizing myself for that, and then I'm abandoning myself even more. I'm disconnecting from my life energy even more, and then I wonder why I can't make the change I want to make. So a lot of my whole orientation is, I would say, kind of deeply relational as well, of like, how are we relating to everything? Because your relationship to everything in your life will determine how you experience it.
Yes. Oh, Claire, I mean, there's so many truth bombs in there. And obviously, I work with women as well, and we work with women at Women Are the Medicine. And this whole sense of sort of not wanting to be disapproved of in some way, not wanting to share our voice or share our gifts in case we get it wrong. It's so apparent in the women that we work with. And it is, you hit the nail on the head when you said, people think that it just has to be this way, that this is just who I am and this is just how it is. And it really isn't. It really is. I think the first part is understanding that this is conditioned behavior, and this is not actually who you are. This is not actually who you're meant for. Who you're meant to be. And I just wonder, what's your own story of how you came to sort of reclaim your own essence and understand this? How did you get to do this for other people?
Yeah. So my own story has sort of been very long and winding and evolving. But if I really, I guess, begin at a point that really speaks to what you were just saying around this, like speaking one's truth and kind of the feeling of stuckness. I, since the age of 23, I've got a degree, a science degree, I've got a master's in psychology, I've done postgraduate training in clinical psychoneuroimmunology, mindfulness teacher, yoga teacher, specializing in, all different things. I've done a lot of training because I've been doing this work for a long time. And I feel like, it's kind of trendy now to talk about the nervous system, but I was learning about the nervous system and nerding out on it when I was like 23. Do you know what I mean? And so I feel like I'm actually, the way I orient to that is kind of probably different now than most people do, because the arc of my evolution is different, right? But I had so many trainings, and I've always been like grade A student. Do you know what I mean? Like very academic, intelligent, all of these things. And really, I was just very stuck in my career. I was very stuck in a pattern of just never having enough money. And I wasn't able to really speak about my work, or even really condense the essence of my work in a way that felt powerful. And I was living in a huge amount of scarcity and fear. And, about 11 years ago, I really started to change things. And my own journey of waking up to that, because I would look around at other people who seemed like they were kind of doing what I wanted to do, or just showing up so confidently and making money. And my head was a story of like, well, why that person and not me? I have all of these accolades. I have all of this knowledge. I have all of this stuff that should mean it should be so easy for me. And yet it wasn't. It was incredibly difficult for me. And that is really, I think I woke up to, I did so many things in my life, but I really did wake up at that point to the impact that my own past and trauma was having on the way that I was able to show up, and how safe I was feeling, really embodying that level of authenticity, and really giving myself permission to shift from that place of scarcity to more expansion. And that was really, really hard for me. And so I started doing a lot more work with my nervous system from a kind of place that was informed by trauma, that wasn't just like, I'm just going to say a load of affirmations and think that I should just suddenly feel different. I started doing a lot of work with my heart, because that's a huge part of my work. And I'm trained as a heart math coach as well. So I started to really do a lot of work with the energy, and just the connection to my heart, and really learning how to attune to myself in a much deeper level than I ever had. And at that time, I also started to really become aware, like I was saying earlier, of this isn't, because until then, my story was, this is just who I am. I'm just different to other people. I just find this hard. I just can't do this. It was kind of a story of like, it's fine. It's great for them. They can do it, but they're not me and I can't do it. And I really started to really untangle from that story and see how that was kind of, again, what I call like a trauma vortex. It was like a story based in my past that it was so seductive to me, because it gave me a sense of safety, because it pulled me into a place where I knew how to be. I knew how to live in that place of feeling scarce and feeling fear and feeling like I need to protect myself. But I didn't know how to be in the energy of more expansion and more energetic abundance and all of that stuff. So I really started to wake up to those stories, to wake up to the fact that was the impact of past and conditioning, and really that I had a choice, and that I actually could learn how to use the power of my body and my mind to create myself consciously. Because we can say, trauma is all of the ways that we've been created unconsciously. And then healing is, how do we create ourselves consciously? How do we use the light and the movement and the energy of our consciousness, which is our capacity to see? How do we use that to create the experiences internally and the outcomes externally that we actually want to see in our life? And for me, that was really a journey of like radical responsibility taking, and like being a self-referencing human being. So really taking radical responsibility for the fact that the reality I experience is the one I generate. Like there isn't really an exception to that. the precision of exactly what it is that I experience out there is always based on where, like, what am I generating? What filter am I looking through? What stories am I looking through? What is the whole energetic of my whole body mind that I'm coming from in the way that I'm relating or not relating to my environment, to myself. And so I also just started to really wake up, get a lot more attuned, connect to my heart, and take radical responsibility for what it was that I was actually creating and the meaning that I was making through the filters that I was looking through. And, obviously it's like, well, the rest is history, but it obviously has been a huge journey for me. And, healing is never linear. And often we will come back to the same places, but with a new level of awareness. And then we unwind a pattern a bit deeper and we unwind a pattern a bit deeper. It's not like a once and done thing. But my life and my business changed tremendously within a pretty incredible amount of time when I started to really be committed to the person that I was becoming in a way that I never had before. And it was really that level of commitment, that level of like devotion to myself and real responsibility for what is it that I want to create. And I think for me, having children also, or at least especially when I had my daughter, was another huge catalyst of like, I want to be able to show her what's possible, and to really teach her through my own embodiment about self-worth and taking up space and going for what you want and, owning your desires in the world.
And what is that, or what did that look like, or what does it look like for you now in terms of how you show up as an embodied version of yourself, how you start your day? Like, what are some of the perhaps practices or techniques that you started to build into your day to kind of remind you of who you are? Because, it's not a once and done, right? It's not suddenly you do this practice and there you are the person you are meant to be. Like, there's this consistent built leveling up of who you are. So where do people even begin? What does it look like?
Yeah. And again, I think for me, that's a journey that has, that is constantly evolving. But what it did and kind of still does in some degrees look like, because what I did at the beginning of my journey it definitely isn't exactly the same as what I'm doing now, because that was many years ago. But I would, I think journaling was a huge thing for me, and writing. And when I said that piece around really unwinding from all of that conditioning and seeing the filter as a filter and seeing story as a story, to really start getting very clear on, and again, it's something that I now call like the preformed self, but it's the self that's based in the past, that's like, it's like a bound self. It already has a form, and that form doesn't change, because it's this preformed self that exists from the past. And so I wouldn't have used that word then, but really getting very clear on what are all of the things that preformed self believes. What are all of the stories that preformed self tells about oneself? What are the stories that self tells about the world, about other people, about things that are difficult, about showing up, about making money? What beliefs does this part of me have about, being seen and all of these things? So to be able to really start to see that this isn't the entirety of like the unification of who I am. This is when I exist from this place, I'm really just existing from past experiences and this kind of contraction in my whole energy field, my whole body, my whole mind. And what I now call like your soul stream self, which is the part of you that is in that like update from your soul, the part of you that is fed by that potential to be, to become, to expand. Like what are the things that kind of soul stream self believes about the world, about myself, about being seen, about wealth, about all of these things, and really getting clear on like, well, these are stories, right? And who I am as a human being can never be located this preformed self from the past. Like, that is not who I am as a human being. And actually, who I really am is all of that, like, essence and movement and light of my soul. And that I actually have the capacity to choose. And one of the key things about making a choice is that you actually have to have a higher level of awareness of the unconsciousness that you're existing within. Otherwise, it just is what it is. And doing a lot of like heart focused breathing, I started to kind of initially developing my capacity to connect to my heart, because we in our culture just think of the heart as like it's just this part of our anatomy that pumps blood, and if you get a heart attack, it's to do with that thing. But really, our heart is it has its own brain. We know through so much research now that there's a whole mass collection of neurons in the human heart that have their own capacity to sense, to memorize, to kind of make sense of things in their own way, just like our brain does. We also have neurons in our heart, and it's called the heart brain. And so I started to really learn about that, to really understand about that, to learn about the power of like the heart's electromagnetic field, which is a huge thing, and the whole of your brain waves and your respiratory rate, and so many things in your body are entrained to the rhythmic field of your heart. So what is happening in your heart is actually a key indicator of your nervous system function, of how regulated you are, of your level of resilience, and on a more kind of metaphysical and spiritual connection. There's so much that the ancient wisdom traditions have taught about the power of the human heart and love and compassion and all of that stuff. So yeah, I really, and I still every day I will spend time communing and connecting to my heart, and sometimes that involves movement. And kind of gesture. Sometimes that involves just sitting quietly and just through focusing my attention, and really just learning how to get the rhythm of my heart in this what we call like a very coherent or resonant state. And some of those practices are really simple, and I've been doing that for many, many years. And the piece around attunement. So, for instance, the other morning I spent half an hour just feeling the way my breath moved in my fingertips. Do you know what I mean? Like that. I mean, I wouldn't have done that 10 years ago, but 10 years ago, or even previously in my journey, it's, really just being able to connect to your body, to like take, if you think, and I often do the image of like an egg timer, that if you spin an egg timer up, all the sand is at the top, right? This is what most people live in. Like all my life energy, all my awareness it's all up here. And I know that I have a body, but I don't really live from my body. I don't really make decisions from my body. It's all very much up here. So a lot of practices that are really all designed to like, how do you like take that egg timer and just let all that sand kind of come down so that you can actually be in the intelligence of your body more, because there is so much deep wisdom and ancient intelligence, and we're not as old as our passports say. We are ancient, the life that has evolved in us is ancient. So yeah, a lot of practices really around just cultivating a really deep level of attunement to my body in the moment. And then visioning work is a huge thing. And that's something that I still do now. And for me, that is a lot I do that through my heart. But really connecting to the potential that I want, the potential that exists that I'm actually choosing, and the what is the vision I have, and learning how to really be the embodiment of that right now in the moment. And I think the key about that for me is that it has to be non-dissociative, because a lot of the ways I think sometimes that can be taught, and I use the word embodied co-creation. I don't use the word manifestation, because a lot of people have very definite ideas of what they think that is, etc., which could be good, could be bad. I don't really care. But that it has to be done in a way that is not an escape from your present reality. And And that, I think, is really important. And that's where the deeper levels of somatic healing and attunement really come in, that actually I can connect to my vision, and I can really, through my whole embodiment right now, I can learn how to feel into that, to presence it, to really bring it alive in each one of my cells. But that I'm doing that from a place that also has the wisdom and the capacity to really exist in the now without needing to run away to someplace better. Like, oh, when I get there, I'll feel better. Or when I get to that place, I can relax. It's like, no, let's cultivate that within you now. And then that becomes so much of a foundation for any of the really powerful visioning work that we can do as human beings. So, and of course, there's like huge nuances of all of what I just said there in terms of what that actually looks like day to day in my life. But those are probably really key things in my journey, and many of them still existing today, that I do on like a daily basis, in addition to self-care things around, like I always make sure I have a good breakfast. I'm like, there's a lot of things I pay attention to in my physical being to really nourish and sustain all of that. But yeah.
No, they sound like really delicious practices. Thank you for taking the time to explain those. It's so important to give people a flavour of what it is that you still do and what you actually do and what works, because you're speaking from a place of of gnosis, of absolute experience and knowledge. It's not something that you've just read and decided to teach. This is literally your embodied teaching. So thank you so much for sharing that. I just want to talk about safety for a minute, safety in the body. I know a lot of what you speak about is cultivating that connection with the body, that consent, so that that you're acting from a place of, you do feel safe. But then I think people can get confused between safety and comfort, and mistake discomfort for, oh, that isn't safe. How do we extrapolate that? How do we distill or discern between those two things? Because actually a lot of the big bold steps that we have to take for that expansiveness can feel a little bit unsettling because it's really new and unfamiliar.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point of conversation, and something that I speak about a lot and I'm really passionate about. And a mantra that I have, I guess it's not a mantra, it kind of is, but it's also a question that I have learnt to ask myself a lot in my life is, am I unsafe or am I uncomfortable? So when I ask myself that question, what I'm asking myself is, right now in the present moment, is my physical life in mortal danger? Because that's really when we're really talking about the necessity of being so unsafe that you have to rely on a survival mechanism to be okay. What the body mind is really interpreting is that there is this mortal threat. That is the kind of interpretation. That's the level at which we then need to switch into those survival responses, because they're called survival responses for a reason, right? So when I ask myself that question, what I'm really inviting myself to do is to actually land in the moment that I'm in, look around, orient to everything, and ask myself, am I unsafe? Well, no. I'm very privileged that almost every time I ask myself that question, the answer is no, I'm not. Am I uncomfortable? Fuck yes. I'm really uncomfortable. And often the story of the whole mind and body is one that, the word I'm looking for, enmeshes unsafety and discomfort. So the story becomes, I'm unsafe, I'm unsafe, I'm unsafe. And every time that there's that story, unconsciously or otherwise, we're reinforcing our need to move further into a survival mechanism. Because, I'm unsafe. I need to use my survival mechanisms to keep me safe. I need to get my fight or flight running, even though I might just be about to give a webinar to 30 people, or I might just be about to record a reel talking about something I care about, So I think it's very important that we actually get in the habit of asking ourselves that question, and not from a place to invalidate that there is a story of unsafety, and that there can be things that we get to tend to, but that we actually get to live in this high level of discernment of like, well, no, I'm not unsafe. I'm deeply uncomfortable. And actually that's okay, because it's not okay. Like, if I really am unsafe, like, that's not cool. I need to like fight, flight, run, free. I need to do something about that. But if I can recognize I am safe, I'm wildly uncomfortable, it's a different conversation that I'm having with myself, and it's a different capacity I'm building to stay in the room, to be resilient, to be brave, because we do have to be brave. We can't grow and expand without a level of being brave. And the bravery that I really advocate for is that you can bring your body along with you, right? And that it's, we get to have ways and tools and ways of being that help us to create that level of discernment in our body. So I can actually begin even if it's just like a 5% way, to feel I'm not unsafe. I'm just really uncomfortable. Feel my feet on the floor. Take a breath. Just tiny little things that begin to open up a window where there is the capacity for more kind of inner movement and regulation and aliveness. So I think, and something that I also speak about a lot, because it's a really important part of this conversation, is that, and I think sometimes in some circles or in some ways online, I think the conversation can be a little unhelpful, in the sense of that it could lead people to think that safety is an absolute, that safety is something I have to absolutely have before I do anything. Because if I'm doing something that feels unsafe, then clearly I need to just back away from that and do something different. And I really have a big problem with that, because it's, again, like, well, good luck growing. Good luck being a brave human being, and good luck doing the thing that you really want to do in the world if you believe you have to feel safe absolutely before you can take the action that you really want to take in the world, because that's not the way that it goes. But yes, we do need to be able to bring our bodies along and have ways of regulating and resourcing ourselves and orienting and bringing our bodies into the now, and allowing that discernment to be something we can feel, that I'm not unsafe, I'm uncomfortable. And that it really is okay to not feel completely safe in the moment that you're doing anything bold and expansive and new, because our whole brains and bodies and nervous systems are designed to move towards the familiar, right? So anything that is new, is novel, is unfamiliar, there's going to be a story about, oh, that's not okay, and that's unsafe, and really the whole mechanism of that story is to realign you with the assumption. The assumption is I'm not safe. So the story and everything you then do, consciously and unconsciously, is designed to realign you with the assumption you're holding, which is that I'm not safe. So I think it is part of, like, we do have to really be aware of what are the stories. And when I talk about stories, it's like whole body mind, like stories are somatic as well as cognitive. Like, we don't have to get into a real like debate against these things, but what are the stories that we are living by, that we are unconsciously assuming and that we are consenting to? Because if I'm consenting to a story that says it's not safe for me to speak my truth, well, no, it's not safe, because I've consented to a story that says it's not safe. And now my whole body and mind is going about, moving me back into the assumption that I'm already holding about my life. And again, that's part of, our brain and body is designed to create this coherence between what it is that I believe, like, again, those self-concepts that I'm consenting to, that maybe I don't even know I am, but what is it that I believe and what is the reality I experience? And so our system is constantly trying to create a coherence between those two things. So we do have to get really aware of that. And the key word for me is just, I think it's so wise to be able to have that level of discernment about the reality that you're actually experiencing.
Yeah, and there's always going to be some degree of risk if you are a woman looking to break out of the patriarchal system, if you are an entrepreneur who's looking to grow and expand. I mean, it's inherently risky to be in either of those or both of those fields if you're working with female entrepreneurs. So yes, absolutely, that discernment. I love what you said about bringing your body along and just, rooting yourself back into a resourced state and place, so that you can take that decision and move forwards from a place of expansion.
And just to briefly speak, because you use the word risk, which I love, because another thing I often will speak about is the difference between a resourced risk and a de-resourced risk, and again, a resourced risk is a risk that I can take, that I can be braver with my life and with the things that I do, that I have more capacity to hold the story of unsafety, but know that I'm uncomfortable, that I can do all of that because I do have a level of being in communication with my body and my aliveness. That it's that piece of like, I'm bringing my body with me, versus a de-resourced risk, which is that, well, I completely live in my head. I've never learned to connect to my body. I'm still running on a whole amount of unprocessed energy from my past. And then I'm going to push myself and push myself and push myself to do a brave thing. And then I'm going to burn out. So there is and that's why there is a lot of nuance to the conversation. And again, that piece of like, it's always so important that we do the life sustaining work of coming into like being in commune with our, again, like what I call like your deep aliveness, like your essence, your wisdom, your deep intelligence, your body, your inner experience, and that you can bring that with you even when it's uncomfortable. You can bring it with you even when it feels so hard to do, but that you don't have to disconnect from that in order to do the hard thing.
Yes. All of that is, yes, just amazing. And I just wonder as well, Claire, how much of your worldview, because you do have incredible depth and spaciousness to your beliefs, that you've been sharing some of those with us now. And I just wonder how much of that has been in any way attributed to the role of psychedelics in your experience as an adult and what they've played in your life.
Yeah. So I feel like psychedelics definitely had a huge impact on, I don't think I would be probably where I am today without them. And many years ago, my whole journey with psychedelics was that, I don't know, I think I was probably about 20 when I did LSD, acid, for the first time. And I had a lot of fear around doing it. But I was held in a really safe space. I was with people I knew very closely, and I was in a very beautiful natural environment. And I spent hours, I would say I had a huge spiritual awakening actually, the time doing LSD, because I spent about probably 5 hours outside, just literally sitting next to a massive tree and just having the most incredible transcendental experience and feeling one with all life and potentials and all of this stuff that really and of course there's a huge amount of kind of reintegration, like back into life, and a lot of that I don't think happened until actually a lot later in my life, where I could really embody that and like bring all of that light right down into my root chakra, rather than it just existing kind of in a more ephemeral field. But for me, it was such a beautiful experience. It was really life-changing, and it really opened me up to so much deep connection with nature, with life. And so for me, I really feel like the fact that I was in this very beautiful natural environment was a really important thing for me. And I used to, at one point in my life, smoke a lot of weed and play a lot of guitar. And again, at that point, I had been just really always so academic at school. And although I was very artistic and creative, that was never nurtured, because it was like, well, Claire's so academic and she's so sporty. So, you know, it wasn't a thing that I ever had any real kind of nurturing of. And I never really identified myself as a particularly creative or artistic person because of the conditioning I received growing up, which is that Claire's super clever. She's so clever. You know, that's becomes a story that you live by. And it was like, oh, well, I'm just not you know, there are creative people and artistic people, and then there are clever intellectual people, and I'm one of those. You know, that's such a binary thing, but that was kind of the messaging that I received. And so, and again, I feel like weed is a very spiritual plant. You know, it again is something that for so long people have been using to help them access different states of consciousness. And so for me, again, also weed was a really important, I think, part of my journey of really opening up my creativity as well, and like getting me out of my analytical mind. And I would just sit and play guitar and for hours, and I got really good at it, and that was amazing. And yeah, and I've done acid a few times in my life, a kind of a different phase in my life, so that's not something I do now. But yeah, it's had a huge impact on me, and I think there is such a space, and you know, we're really seeing this as well now, aren't we, in the worlds of therapy and trauma healing, that there is, you know, there's they're using ketamine assisted therapy and MDMA assisted therapy and all of these things, because if we're held in the right space and we're guided to a level of kind of integrating what it is that gets opened up in us, it can be such a huge catalyst for again moving into a different state of consciousness, where you're actually not actually resonating at the same frequency that you were before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes to all of that. It's psychedelics are so helpful for opening your perspective, sharing with you a new worldview that you can't then kind of unsee, even though, as you've described it, you can have a psychedelic experience and it doesn't either make sense, or you don't really embody it or integrate it until later. Because it can be a challenging thing to do. It's so ineffable. Like, how do you explain to someone, say, who's never seen colour, what a rainbow is? And that's kind of what it's like with psychedelics.
Yeah,
trying to really describe something that cannot be described. But yes, extremely helpful for opening up critical learning windows, for helping people to deal with trauma. The space that Rachel and I work in is really around courage and authenticity, and, you know, kind of coming home to yourself from a place of that knowing, like suddenly you really know what matters and what is of value to you, and you kind of get a real glimpse of who you are without the stories. It's kind of a way for someone to just experience that, because when you are locked in your own personal narrative, it's very hard, as you've said, it's really hard to see kind of that awareness is not like a swathe of unveiling. It is a picture that's starting to form over time as you do all the beautiful work with coaches like yourself. So and psychedelics are certainly they're not a quick fix, but they can take someone on to a viewpoint where they can see and sense and feel and almost embody it for that experience, and then they have that imprint that they can take and they go, okay, I now know what it is that I'm seeking from a sort of visceral experience.
Yeah, I love the way that you said, you know, that you can't unsee, like you have an expanded kind of vision of something, and then, you know, you don't just forget that, you know, and you can't unsee it, you know, and so going back to my first experience was that for weeks I carried this, like, I just felt so much more expanded, and I, you know, life felt very, very different, you know. And again, because it was that, yes, I had that experience in that kind of level of intensity in those hours that I was kind of doing that, but then there was all of this kind of openness and awakening that happened, that you can't just look away from that, you know. You can't unsee. It's like, you can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee what you've seen.
I really enjoy, Claire, how you blend your incredibly academic, scientific background, and then you have this deeply spiritual, metaphysical understanding and knowing and of energetics and heart math and coherence and the somatics. You're just such a delicious blend of everything. And if there's someone listening who's going, yes, I really want to work with Claire, what are some of the ways that you are offering to work with people at the moment? How can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. So I have a one-to-one mentorship, which I have a couple of spaces open until the end of the year. I have my Anchored Trauma-Informed certification, which is a journey specifically for coaches or helping professionals who want to really learn how to embody and integrate what does it really mean to be trauma-informed in our work, with our clients, in our business, in our marketing. And then I have a new program that I'm currently creating. I actually have a lot of new things that are coming out in the new year, because it's actually a kind of really beautiful shift that is going to be happening in my world, which I won't speak about now, but there's newness that's coming. So I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but by the point it comes out, I might have there might be a new offering, which you can find on my Instagram page, which is Claire_Diane_, but also just the best place to really learn about me and my work and connect is to go to my website, which is clairediane.com.
And I highly encourage people to sign up to your newsletter as well, which I get, and I really enjoy reading. You give a ton of value when you give your masterclasses. So absolutely, people must sign up to that to find out when those next masterclasses are. And I'm excited about your new offerings. And very, very intrigued.
It's a little bit cryptic, sorry, but
it's all right. No, it's fine. I know what it's like.
Mystique.
Yes, why not? Why not? And then we do have a closing tradition on the show, and that is to ask our guests, if you were made Madam President of the world for a day and you got to implement one change or one law that would never be reversed, that would absolutely come true, what is it that you would choose to do?
Such a big question. So I think that it would be something around, as a core part of the whole educational system from a very young age, teaching human beings about the power of their bodies and their minds and their nervous systems, and really developing that capacity to really be in connection with themselves and to really harness the power that they have through their bodies, through their hearts, to be the change that they want to be in the world, and to live more from a place of presence and deep self-understanding. Because a huge belief that I have is that, there is no change in the world outside of the change in ourselves. And it again is that, that classic quote of, be the change that you want to see in the world. And that fundamentally the world isn't changed by just the opinions we hold. It's changed by the embodiment that we express, by the vibration that we hold. It's changed by who it is that we're being in every moment, because it's easy to say one thing and actually completely live another. So I think it would be, some kind of law that makes that all of that stuff mandatory.
I love that. And yes, the world would be a very, very different place if we adhered to that. And in some way you are doing your part in that by offering your beautiful medicine to the world. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for the work that you do, and a big thank you for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I'm a big fan of your work. And yeah, I just can't wait to see what's coming out in the new year. So thanks again.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing.